If we keep going this way, we're going to hell in a handbasket. And we probably won't even have a basket to go to hell in. We are in big trouble because, as we started the conversation, these communities are hardest hit by some of, especially the mega events that we see, things like Katrina, hurricanes like that. We saw Maria, how devastating it was in Puerto Rico, in the Virgin Islands, in other parts of the Caribbean. We see these mega tornadoes, tsunamis that are incredibly dangerous and they do extensive damage in communities. So, if these are the very same communities that are getting very little funding, they simply will not be able to recover. They won't be able to have that resilience that when they are hit, they can bounce back and bounce back either to the same level or better. The capacity is wiped out. If people are forced to leave these communities every time they get devastated, you're also just wiping out your human infrastructure, your organizational infrastructure. And so it makes very little sense. The other thing that we do see happening when we look at funding is if you look at what people of color are asked to do with the amount of funding they get. So if you give an organization, for instance, $100,000 and you're asking them to do youth engagement, do work around disparities in health exposures, do work around food justice, you're asking them to do 8 or 9 things with $100,000, all of which require a lot more than $100,000 to do. You're really reducing the effectiveness of those activists and those communities. The funding is too little and the ask is too big. If you look at big green organizations, your top 10, your top 20 environmental organizations, they will easily get $2 or $3 million. And they're asked to put that money to 1 or 2 issues. So they're asked for very targeted, or they ask and get money for very targeted actions and activities that they can do. Whereas people of color organizations, organizations in low income communities are getting, a tenth of the money, but they're being asked to do maybe 3 or 4 times as much work with it.
Yes. I was talking to a colleague of mine who is in Puerto Rico earlier this week, and he does environmental work there. And I asked him what it's been like since Hurricane Maria, especially after COVID. I was there last year myself and saw in the 5 days that I was there, the whole electricity system shut down on the island. It was during the earthquakes. And it was, when you look at it, you still have, and this is what he was saying even to this day, that he took his wife to Florida for a vacation. And when they came back, it hit them what they had gotten used to living with. And it now is something that people are used to living with, electrical poles that lean and could fall and actually really electrocute someone if they hit you. The electricity going out twice a week apparently is an average there now. Water that is not really safe to drink.
Right.
And, streets that have holes because there's not a lot of government infrastructure anymore. And I talked to him about this. And I saw that when I went there myself. And it was stressful to me, I have to say. It's like living in a place that had a huge event that hasn't fully recovered. And it's years later. And what he said is that people have gotten used to it. And I said, well, what would it take to change that? And he said, you would have to do something about the governance, about the politicians. And I said, well, what would it take to do that? He said, we would actually have to have programs to organize people politically. And we don't have that. And I said, you don't have it at all? Because it's a very politically engaged community. There apparently are not many sort of engagement or leadership development groups, which I used to be part of groups like that here in the States. So, and I said to him, well, what would it take to have that? Because I know he used to work in that when he was in the States. And he said, $500,000. And I said, so for only $500,000, you could actually really change things there? He says, yeah, but you have to have it for organizing, which no one's funding. It's a very small amount of dollars to raise for such a huge impact.